Go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Adolphus Graves, and I'm the court administrator here at Cobb County Juvenile Court, and it is a wonderful opportunity to see so many of your smiling faces. A lot of our common partners are in the room today, so being able to fellowship and break bread together, I believe, is an awesome expression of where we are right now and the progress that we've made as a county through the challenges of the pandemic. And the work that has continued to take place every single day. I think there are a lot of you all, I think you all work with each other on almost a daily basis. I'd just like to ask that you give yourself a quick round of applause for making it through the challenges of the pandemic. We at the Juvenile Court really believe wholeheartedly that is the work that makes Cobb County Juvenile Court and our community exceptionally special as it relates to juvenile justice related matters. Whether it's matters of dependency or delinquency or children in need of services, we truly believe that our strength and the value of this community is deeply rooted in the work that each of you all do every single day. And that's why we wanted to really support that work by coming up with an approach that is rooted in the statute that really highlights and emphasizes our best community-based efforts to provide prevention strategies, intervention strategies, and to really address the needs of delinquency cases and dependency cases and CHINS cases as they come to the court at the earliest point possible. We could not do that without you all, so we just say thank you all so much for that. So without further ado, first up to provide us with the statutory parameters of our efforts that we are establishing here at the Juvenile Court and in the community is our presiding Juvenile Court Judge, Wayne Granis. Judge Granis?
So basically, we're looking at three different statutes. These statutes that we looked at provide the foundation for the premise that why we're meeting today and why we believe moving forward that this is the best possible way to move forward. The idea is to have as few touches with these children, whether it be CHINS, dependency, delinquency, whatever type of case, to have as few touches with the children, with the court as possible. And as Mr. Graves talked about, intervention, prevention, programming, and programming through the community. And that's why we brought everybody together. You are our community partners. So the first statute we're looking at is the opportunity to actually develop or a community-based risk reduction program, and that is 151138, and that gives us the authority to actually create a risk reduction program. And then under 151139, that's a risk and assessment or risk and needs assessment and case plans, issuance of orders. What that statute does is we have developed and purchased a risk needs assessment program called the YLS, and that will be presented a little later on in the program. But the risk and needs assessments around 151139 and case plans, which we're going to go into in a little more detail, provide the opportunity for a panel to get involved, a community panel to get involved to provide community services to these children and their families. And then 151140 is information sharing and confidentiality. And information sharing goes specifically into talking about memorandums of agreement with different agencies, the Department of Family and Children Services, the Educational Department, the police departments, etc., and the school, and the court itself. All right, so community-based risk reduction program under 151138. An early intervention program shall be the purpose of developing and implementing intervention actions or plans to divert the children and their families from becoming involved in future cases in the court. And the court's involvement is only for the limited purpose of facilitating the development of the program. So basically, the only part that we really play is the development of the program. Once the program is developed, once we develop the programs, then the stakeholders that are proceeding with it, they take it from there. The protocol agreement shall authorize the exchange of confidential information in the same manner and subject to the same restrictions, conditions, and penalties as provided in Code Section 151140. And what that means is that protocol agreements, just as it sounds, the reason we're here is we're going to develop these protocol agreements with all these different agencies. And like I said, the schools, the Department of Family and Children Services, the, a couple of different state agencies. We do have, we are dealing specifically, some of the issues that we're dealing with is, we're developing a student attendance protocol. We're developing a protocol for children that are being that are subject of human trafficking. We're developing diversion programs to prevent delinquent kids from going the route of going actually through the court system. We're also developing a protocol to deal with educational neglects. Each participating agency or entity shall refer to the case to a multi-agency staffing panel. And the multi-agency staffing panel is going to consist of the stakeholders. Not all the stakeholders, obviously, but the stakeholders. And the panel shall develop a multi-agency intervention plan for the child. Each participating agency or entity shall work with other agencies involved to educate a child's parent, guardian, or legal custodian and such child on the importance of following the intervention plan and on the consequences if anyone is referred to the court. So basically, it's kind of using, the old adage of carrot and stick, that, we're trying to keep the children out of the court system. So, we want to encourage the families to follow the plan. And if they follow the plan, then the case won't even have to proceed in court. However, the court is, the last effort to provide services to the families. Not the first effort, the last effort. Under 151139, in any jurisdiction within which a risk reduction program has been established, when a child comes before the court for disposition, the court may order that a risk assessment or risk and needs assessment, and that's going to be talking about the YLS. And at that juncture, the family and the child are going to go and they're going to be have an assessment done by the assessment unit. And then the assessment unit will provide basically the factors that bring that child to the court. And then we'll address those factors. And those factors can either be addressed, quite honestly, through the court or through the community. They do not have to be addressed through the court. If the results of a risk assessment demonstrates a need for a case plan, the court may order that a case plan be developed by a panel representing community agencies as authorized by the court. Again, that's that panel. That's that bringing in that community interaction. That panel could that panel could consist of, someone from the school system, someone from the Department of Family and Children Services, someone from the police department, mental health, all of the different agencies that we can marshal to provide the appropriate services for these kids and their families. All right, so a designated representative from each participating agency may exchange as necessary information, medical records, school records, immigration records, records of adjudication, treatment records, and any other records or information which may aid in the assessment of an intervention with the children and families in such program, if such exchange of information is ordered by the court or consented to by the parties. And that's where I'm talking about the memorandums of agreement. And that is where we're exchanging information. We're not doing duplication of services. We're assuring that we are getting all the necessary information to provide the appropriate plan for the family and the child. And such information shall be used by such individuals and agencies only for the purposes of providing in this chapter. That's basically saying that the information isn't going to be shared with anybody else, and it's only going to be utilized to provide the service for the child and the family. Now, believe it or not, that's my only piece, but I think it's a very important piece. It's very integral to understanding where we are going as a court. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of programs that are going to be coming out of this. This risk reduction program, it's going to be risk reduction programs. And we're really excited about moving forward. So thank you.
What we would like to do next is to just highlight our intake front-end unit, which is run by our court support manager, Mrs. Janessa Neri.
Good afternoon, and thank you again for your continued interest in ensuring that our community and families and the juveniles are safer and, of course, have a productive life. The mission of Cobb County Juvenile Court is to ensure that children, families, and the community are protected in civil and delinquency matters brought before the court. Children and families are provided guidance and services that will be conducive to rehabilitating, strengthening, and restoring them to become productive members of society. The court strives to meet this mission by utilizing resources within the community that promotes accountability, provide positive alternatives, and reunify families when in the best interest of the child. I think it's important to note as well that our mission requires and it integrates a collective approach to promoting a healthy and flourishing community. And I want to keep highlighting that because that is the goal on the front end of the intake department as we are making the necessary changes. The court support division entails the intake unit, the assessment unit, and our family therapist unit. And it was structured in a way to highlight early intervention strategies to raise awareness of the needs of court-involved juveniles with stakeholders and our parents. And we want to identify what those necessary rehabilitative programs and services are to address the specific needs that are identified from our risk and needs assessment. Again, some of the changes that we are working to implement in the intake unit, we are working to implement a screener, and that screener will identify what that risk level is at the initial stage. Instead of working on the back end, we're gonna look at the front end, identify the risk, and then start to work to implement services. We're gonna also continue to notify our victims by sending out the victim impact statements. And we're gonna refer cases more efficiently by appropriately addressing what the needs are. So if the needs identify that they can go through the pre-adjudication stage, then that's the route we'll send them. If there is indication that the case needs to go directly to court, then that's what we're gonna focus on. So identifying the next steps are important in order to rectify some of the issues that bring our kids to the court. The assessment unit will be used to complete the full YLS, which is the youth level of services. At the intake level, it's just a screener to identify what the possible risk may be. At the next stage is our assessment unit, and they'll conduct the full YLS and identify what the risk actually is according to the evidence-based screen, and then the needs, and we'll also be looking at the strengths of our juveniles and families. Those with the higher risk, they will be moved forward to hopefully whatever program or options are available by the court. Additionally, our CHINS population, we know that they're a very vulnerable population, and sometimes working to identify those youth's needs can be overwhelming. However, we want to identify or utilize screeners as well to look at what those risks or the needs are within the family and encourage the family to take advantage of services outside of the court. And that way they could develop more sustainable change away from the court and in the community with our vetted community service providers. Next, we have our family therapist unit. We know that our kids sometimes, they walk in the door, our families really, they walk in the door in the middle of a crisis. And we want to be able to respond to that crisis or those situations immediately. Therefore, our family therapist unit, we just recently went through training with the Columbia Suicide Severity Rate and Screen. That will help us to ensure that we are identifying at the front end if there are any suicidal ideations and concerns or even risky behaviors that may lead to that level of occurrence, and then implementing whatever recommendations at that stage to hopefully reduce the occurrences of those issues. We're also looking to vet agencies. We're always looking for agencies who can address the youth's needs, and we're looking at the dynamic needs of the juvenile, those needs that can change or those dynamic factors that are changeable. Because we know that our kids are growing, they're young, and research tells us that their minds are not fully developed until in the 20s. So we have time to work with changing and building upon their situation and really looking to implement more positive childhood experiences. So with that, we'll continue to be adamant about searching for those services and also training with our stakeholders so that we can be more responsive, not only trauma responsive, but also culturally responsive to the needs of the families that come to juvenile court. And that is it. Thank you so much. Annie?
The next presentation that we have, we wanted to highlight a couple of initiatives that exist within the community that exemplify the level of community-based work that already exists. One of the things that you'll hear the constant theme and that we built upon even from our last meeting in November is that what we're really trying to do is maximize the use and the connection to existing community-based services, because what our goal is primarily is to not just to have the child be compliant with a court order for the duration of that court order, but to really link the children with services that can help address whatever those needs were that led to their referrals to the court well beyond their time with the court. So a lot of the services that already exist, what we're hoping to achieve is that by screening and staffing cases and really doing that in-depth deep dive on the front end gives us more information to really the holistic aspect of what is going on in that child's life and in some instances that family's life. So again, we can look at a safer community being built by long-standing relationships in the community and connection to services that they may have at their disposal anyway. So one of the ways that we want to highlight that is that we're fortunate at the Juvenile Court that one of our family therapists also serves as the local interagency planning team chairperson for the county, which is a process that accepts referrals primarily around mental health issues that children may be experiencing, but that can be referred by any entity in the community, including families. So without further ado, Cicely, you come forward.
As he mentioned, I'm the chairperson of Cobb County Local Interagency Planning Team and have been for the past 5 years. This is a thankless job, I have to say, and so we don't get too many people who volunteer to do this because it does require a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication. This is a voluntary position, Did you volunteer? We volunteered to do this. So there's no extra pay or incentive to do this other than to link the families, the youth and families of Cobb County to needed mental health services. So just to give you a brief overview of LIPT, let's look at how it came about, just a little history. It is a legislative mandate which states that every county in the state of Georgia has to have an LIPT set up for the families, for the youth and families who suffer from mental health challenges, mental health and behavioral health challenges. Because of the sizes of certain counties, the teams can either be single counties like Cobb County, because we're a large county, or multi-county teams. Also, LIPTs have as their main purpose improving and helping with coordination of services for children and youth in the community who have severe emotional and behavior challenges, which can also include substance use. We don't want to forget about substance use disorders. Oh, y'all like that? I didn't realize I had done that. Goals, our goals, primary goals of LIPT, to ensure that youth with behavioral challenges and their families have access to a system of care in their area. We don't want them to have to travel to Gwinnett, Fulton, Douglas. We want to link them up with services in their area to remove as many barriers as possible. We also want to ensure that the provision of an array of community therapies. That's why I said I need to talk to Highland Rivers. We need as many community-based providers as possible, because ultimately the goal is to prevent youth from going into residential treatment. We want to keep them at home with their families where they can best be served and help the youth and the families. And we also want to decrease fragmentation and duplication of services. We see that a lot. We see that a lot at the court. You know, kids come in and they might have services, the same types of services, or are placed in services that might be a duplication. We kind of help, that team helps pull it all together so that we don't have that duplication and broken pieces. We kind of put the pieces together and we work with all systems. That is the goal, to work with all systems. And we also try to facilitate effective referral processes that will ensure that children have access to the services and support that they need for optimal functioning. That is the goal, appropriate services. I talked about system of care. So for those who don't know, what is system of care? What does that mean? Basically, a system of care is a spectrum of effective community-based services and supports for children and youth with or at risk for mental health or other challenges and their families, that is organized into a coordinated network, builds meaningful partnerships with families and youth, and addresses their cultural and linguistic needs in order to help them function better at home, in school, in the community, and throughout life. That's a handful, and it's a tough job, but that's what we try to do each and every month that we meet, and behind the scenes after that monthly meeting, is to provide that system of care approach. Well, who is LIPT? Who is the team? Basically, as I mentioned earlier about the legislative mandate, there are key players that are mandated to participate on the team. And it's actually written into code that LIPTs will have represented the DJJ, Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Public Health, Division of Family and Children's Services, Georgia Voc Rehab Agency, a member of the special education staff of the local education agency, and a local mental health agency. And they left out our local community service board. I believe they are actually mandated players as well. And I am happy to say, because this is a very rare thing for LIPTs when I'm speaking to other chairpersons, that we have all of these agencies represented at our meetings on a monthly basis. And so that is a big deal to me, and kudos to everybody, because I see a lot of the people who represent the various agencies here with us today. So thank you so much for your support for the youth and families of Cobb County. And also looking at The other mandatory participants, that's the family, the youth and the family. And in order to have a child staffed at an LIPT meeting, family participation is mandatory, is integral. We do know that there are barriers. Sometimes parents have to work. We meet midday. However, there is an option if a parent cannot attend that they appoint a representative in their place to attend. Remember what I said, we don't want to create any unnecessary barriers. And so family support, that community support is a part of that system of care. And so we encourage that. And if a parent is not able to participate, they can appoint someone on their behalf. But parent buy-in is essential, otherwise it won't work. How do we work? Basically, how do we function? Every single month, the second Wednesday of every single month at 1:30. Since the pandemic, we've been meeting virtually, and that actually works well. I think the team wants to continue that way because it's convenient. But basically, we meet that second Wednesday of every single month, and we receive referrals of youth who have actually been diagnosed. We don't staff youth who haven't been diagnosed because there are other ways that we can assist or that the community agencies out here, including our school systems. We have wonderful social work departments at our schools on Marietta End and Cobb End. They're awesome, and they do a lot of help to link those services, those youth and families to those services that are needed. So those youth who have emotional and behavior disorders and are receiving services, and they just haven't been successful in their services. They don't know what's going on. They need more assistance, they need more supports, or they might need replacement of services. They come to us. And we discuss with the family, with the child, if they're able to attend, what the issues are, and we kind of brainstorm and come up with a care plan. The referring agency is the one that does all the forms. They're the one that communicates with the family. I make sure the meeting happens. I don't do the communication with the family as much. I do after the meetings. I generally follow up with a lot of families after the meetings, but they don't know me when they're coming around that table. So that referral source is the key person in making sure that the family is oriented to LIPT processes because it's overwhelming. You come in a room and it's a whole bunch of people sitting around the table that you don't know, and you have to tell everything that's going on with your child and how they're having problems at school, at home, in the community, and a very vulnerable position. And so we like to ask all of our referral sources to kind of orient the parents into what LIPT is and what it means at the meeting. Oh, who can refer? Anyone. I get referrals from everybody. Parents, school representatives, DFACs, Department of Public Health, DJJ, anyone can refer. As a matter of fact, with Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, a lot of times when those services are requested, they say, we need more help, this family needs help, call DBHDD, and let's see what they can do. Guess who the Region 1 rep calls? So you can just bypass that and you can contact me, because I promise you, I have had 5 emails from her last week about referrals that needed referrals. And so DBHDD, unless it's a psychological or some other type of payment type of service that they're paying for, they're gonna contact LIPT. And let me I would be remiss if I didn't say, I don't do this by myself. I do have a co-chair, and that's Alea Shotwell. She is a school social worker at Cobb County Public Schools, and is an awesome co-chair, and we work really well together. I've put our information up, both Alea and I. We communicate every single week about new cases, ongoing cases, and these are the forms that are needed: the release of information, the community care background form, and if you need those forms, you can contact me, or you can go online, and that's actually on the back of your brochure. That website is on the back of your brochure at the bottom to get those referral forms, release of information, or if you just want to know more about LIPT, That's also included on that website. It is pretty awesome. And the Center of Excellence actually maintains that website. Any questions? I went through it kind of quick. Yes. Yes.
Does Georgia Code 495225 that you referenced mandate that each county have a lift, or is it by region? I'm sorry if I missed that part.
It is every county. And every county is broken up to regions. So that's what you're looking at. I believe there's 6 regions in the state of Georgia, according to DBHDD. That,
159 lift?
no, absolutely not. No. That's the mandate. And on that website that I just provided or showed you on the slide that's on the back of that brochure, you can actually get a full list of every single county that and they have all 159 counties, and it'll show you the ones that actually have LIPTs and who the chairpersons are and their contact information.
So not every county is in compliance with the mandate?
Correct.
Understood.
Yes. Yeah, yes. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a comment, and I just want to publicly thank you because you have been a co-chair, I think, longer than 5 years.
I know, I was confused. I've been a part of LIPT for 9, so I was trying to count it, but thank you.
So as we transition to our next presenter, again, we wanted to highlight some existing work that's taking place. So our next presenter is going to come before us and provide us a little information about an acronym that you all may have heard of and a lot of you all work with, but CSEC, and that is the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children. Mrs. Naisha McDowell is the director for the response team for the Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia, and they're responsible for the coordinated efforts and working with a number of our law enforcement departments and partners around the state in addressing the issues that are related to children that are victims of CSEC. And Mrs. Hutzel, if you could, so I don't want to point her out, but she's like a shining star throughout the state as well in that same area. So thank you for joining us. I know you didn't get to introduce yourself. I specialize in pointing people out when they're eating, so.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for being late. I was coming from Macon today.
Again, statewide. So glad to have Ms. Hutzel here as well. So without further ado. Well, you take the
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for allowing us to come today. Thank you, Mr. Graves, for inviting us to speak a little bit more about CSEC. I don't have a beautiful presentation like Ms. Edwards, and it's hard to follow you, ma'am, so just so you know. So glad to be here. I won't be before you long, but we just wanted to point out that we are available as a resource. As we all know, our youth that have experienced commercial sexual exploitation, or commonly known as child sex trafficking, are often overrepresented in our juvenile justice systems. And so we always appreciate the partnership of any of our juvenile courts across the state or any of our juvenile justice professionals, because it really takes us all being at the table to address the issues that we have and the challenges that we have serving our youth that have been impacted by exploitation. Huge shout out to our funders, CJCC, Erica Mortensen, and Amy Hustle for being here as well, and just continuing to keep us in the loop with the various partners that they have connections with. We handed out a one-pager that goes over some of our 2021 data. We want you all to have it. What I will say is this is statewide data that we are sharing with you all today. In 2021, we served 494 youth across the state. And when I say we, that means all 52 of our child advocacy centers, and then our MDT partners that also collaborate with our child advocacy center partners. And just to give you all some context about our organization and just our history, as the Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia, how many of you are familiar with what a child advocacy center is? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Awesome. So that's mostly everyone in the room. So child advocacy centers are basically those community resources that are in place whenever a child experiences any type of victimization, whether it's child sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, or they witness some type of crime. And so those centers are there to basically eradicate what Ms. Edwards mentioned before, just children having to have multiple touch points with different professionals and being overwhelmed by the system. And so the CACs are there so that everyone who needs to intersect with that child can come to one place and provide those services to that child. And so a child will receive a forensic interview. They will receive advocacy services, their families will receive advocacy services, and then if there are therapeutic needs that are in place, they will receive those as well. Many of our CACs also have in-house medical professionals that can provide those medical exams as well. So we've been around since really the 1980s. However, we haven't always had the statewide response to child sex trafficking under our wheelhouse. We actually took that over in the October of 2020. And so the statewide response to child sex trafficking transitioned to our team after a statewide competitive grant. Applications were reviewed, and then our organization was selected after partners at Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Family and Children Services, and CASA reviewed those applications. So very excited about just the opportunity to work with you all. So from there, our organization, which is couched as the CSEC response team, we're a program of CACGA. We provide the assessment and basically the overall resources needed for those kids. So our kids that are suspected CSEC victims, and CSEC is the acronym for Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, the referrals are submitted to us. They can be submitted via a HIPAA-compliant web referral form on our website, and that's cacga.org. You can find it at the bottom of your form there that I just handed out. You can call our hotline. We are fortunate enough to be a part of a phone tree with our other statewide partners such as GBI, Wellspring Living, Tapestry, and some other organizations that serve human trafficking victims. And so you can call that centralized hotline at 1-866-NHTGA or 1-866-363-4842. And you have a phone tree of options that you can choose from. We're option 2 for child services. The rest of the options are related to residential care, related to making a tip to the GBI tip line, and some other services for our foreign national victims and labor trafficking victims as well. And so once you select us, you can make a referral. You speak to a live person. You're not going to get that automated voice once you select option 2. And from there, that child's case will go through the intake process. We have 6 regional care coordinators positioned throughout the state of Georgia. They live in the communities that they serve, which helps us to have a better sort of scope of what's really going on in each community. And so they live and work in their own communities. And from there, once that intake is received, that regional care coordinator is going to be the person who really works that case from start to finish, providing that initial assessment, confirming or non-confirming that child for CSEC, and then connecting them with appropriate resources. CSEC is not an issue that one agency can own. It just isn't. And so our organization certainly doesn't have all the answers, but we try to connect with organizations that can provide those services. Oftentimes our kids come in, there may be some severe mental health and behavioral health challenges that they're facing. There may be some additional severe resource needs as well. And so we have to work with community organizations, and I'm so glad to hear about yours. We'll certainly be in touch to make sure that we're connecting them with the appropriate individuals. And so that's really the focus of our organization. As we expand, we're looking at how can we bring on additional programs and projects to help serve our kids, because one of the things we know is that a rescue is not a rescue if you rescue the body but not the mind. And oftentimes our kids, while they may be physically safe, what happens when we sometimes get them in a physical, secure location? What may happen? The behaviors, there may be some behavior disruptions. They may leave the home that they're placed in, they may run away, and then they're back in your offices. And so that's why we have to work really hard to figure out how can we also address the mental and emotional manipulation that many of our kids have experienced due to commercial sexual exploitation. So that's sort of the next phase of our project. We're a baby startup at this point, but we have a team of dedicated individuals who are not new to the issue of commercial sexual exploitation. So we're doing the best we can to ensure that we continue to improve on our services and serve everyone that we can and make sure no child falls through the cracks. Just to let you all know, in 2021, Cobb had the 4th highest number of referrals. So we certainly need to be in front of our partners across the Cobb County area to make sure that they, 1, understand the scope of this issue across the state, but especially in Cobb County, and 2, understand where they can refer the child to get the assistance and resources that they need. So we are always available. Mr. Graves, Judge Grants, we gave a presentation to them, a month or so ago? And so we're always welcome to come out to your communities. We collaborate with Erica and Amy to give presentations to law enforcement and our other juvenile justice professionals. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to make sure that your community is trained on this issue. Any questions for me or anyone else about CSEC or our organization?
Can you give that phone tree number again?
Yes, ma'am. So it's 1-866-NHTGA. And it's basically 1-866-363-4842.
I have a
Yes, ma'am.
question. So in regards to assessments, I would think that if we're seeing a student, right, truancy is one of those, something's going on, right? We would utilize our advocacy center and they would contact you? Or are you saying that we as the school social worker would contact, not you specifically, but the?
Absolutely. So you all can contact us because we contact or work with 52 child advocacy centers. If for some reason the child goes through the CAC first, they will automatically get in contact with us, but you can always contact us if there's a specific concern for CSEC in general.
Okay.
But it's sort of a give and take. Our CACs know, because they're a part of the response,
Right.
that if there's a concern for CSEC, they contact us and move us in. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, we look forward to working with you all, and I have some cards and other contact if you need one. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. And please take advantage of the presentation that we saw last month, again with the CJCC folks as well, was a phenomenal presentation and a very comprehensive presentation that she's willing to come out and provide that information to any groups, agencies, community entities that you all may work with and or be a part of, whether that's governmental or NGO organizations. They do a lot of great work in the community to bring awareness around that scope of issues. Our last presentation for the day is with regards to our youth level of service inventory. It's called the YLS. We call it YLS CMI, more acronyms for 2022. The YLS CMI 2.0. The CMI stands for Case Management Inventory. Case management inventory?
Yes.
All right, pretty good. Case management inventory, which is the aspect of our work that really works on case planning once we get there. But really just to frame this before Mrs. Scotland comes forward, we want to talk about just the different levels of response that our court has. None of this work is about removing detention from the table completely, right? Our partners here from DHA who are responsible for actually running the facilities that children are detained in throughout the state of Georgia, that is still going to exist as an option for some offenders. We know that there will always be offenses that require that deep-end response. Really what we're trying to do here is to try to just on that front end do the best job possible of that screening and identifying in an objective manner, regardless of what day of week it is, regardless of which employee the child and family comes in contact with, regardless of if that employee that they come in contact with had a bad night, a bad day, a bad morning, that they will get an objective and consistent level of assessment when they come before the court to really do the best job possible to dig beneath those layers that we often see in behaviors and understanding and knowing that there are complex issues that are taking place with underneath and beyond just those behaviors. So what we're really trying to do is really weed out as many children as possible and return them back to community level services, not removing our responsibility from the process, but ensuring that if there's a way that we can limit the touch, which again would be reoffense, because think about it, if we're limiting the touch, if they don't come back, that's because they're not committing new offenses, right? So we're trying to limit that touch and reduce that defend need, and then also being able to focus our efforts of the probation division, of some of our specialized units, and really being able to provide enhanced community level supervision to ensure that these children and families are engaged in those services that we have. And the better job we can do that possible, the better outcomes we'll have as well. Because we all know that the research and the high level research suggests that when children are subjectively just exposed to detention facilities without using risk and needs assessments or without taking these steps of screening and what have you, then what we actually do is create unintended consequences of children being exposed to deeper in children that they otherwise would not be. And how many times have you heard of a child or a parent saying, well, my child is just a follower. They're just following the wrong child, right? And if our response like it is in some jurisdictions becomes, oh, well, let's just put them in the facility for a day or two. Guess who they're going to meet in the facility? The folks that we're trying to keep them away from. And now all of a sudden they're exposed to, based on our unintended negative consequence that we've actually introduced this child to, people that they otherwise would not have known, right? And so if they were engaged in certain low-level activities, now we've connected them with folks that can help them have access to a different level of exposure that they may not even know existed if they had not spent that day or two in the facility. So what we're doing is just being cautious that we don't help to foster more delinquency by just trying to have a general one-size-fits-all response to children's behaviors, which you all know, and even by reflecting who's here today, is a very complex issue as a whole. So without further ado, Ms. Brenda Scotland is going to come. I have to give one quick shout out to Mrs. Scotland and one of our former court administrators. His name is Josh Weeks, who actually left us for another jurisdiction a little bit up 75 North. Probably about 5 years ago, sought out the support of the American Probation and Parole Association and an organization that kind of helped bring this literature to our juvenile court. And through a lot of administrative changes and changes in the common community, her and Mr. Weeks really stuck to it and stayed connected to these national resources to be able to get us to this stage. And with, of course, the support of our county VOC and the support to be able to identify the funds and services to be able to implement this tool and to purchase this tool and what have you, we are at this point where we successfully executed the contract within the last month to actually purchase the YLS. So now we're no longer a jurisdiction that does not have a risk and needs assessment tool, but thanks to that work. So without further ado, Ms. Scotland. I hope that was
Okay, I'm Valina Scotland, like he said, like Mr. Graves said, and yes, we've been working at this for quite some time, and we're happy that we finally have the youth level screening, youth level of service case management inventory 2.0. And I say screening because we researched quite a few tools before selecting this one. So there's a lot that has happened settling on the YLS. And I could go on for a long time about the YLS, but we will give you the Cliff Note version of this so that we can all get back to helping the kids, providing the much needed help that we need to for the children. So, few objectives. The first one, to develop, so that you hopefully develop an understanding of risk and need assessment and classification. A lot of Ms. Nairn and Mr. Graves have touched on assessments and the YLS and talked about that, so I'll kind of go a little more in depth around that, along with an understanding of risk-need responsivity principle and an understanding of the benefits of utilizing risk and need classification in maximizing safety outcomes for both children and the community. I didn't do that. So what is delinquency risk and need assessment? It's a validated tool that uses objective measures to determine a child's individual risk and needs factor in order to objectively inform case processing, decision-making points, and case management supervision strategies. Basically, it's an evaluation to help us obtain information to make better decisions, basically. It supports the court's capacity to develop processes for case management, supervision, alternative case processing, and response to reoffense in a manner that maximizes community safety. It also utilizes a strength-based and gender-informed approach, so it looks at the scoring for males and females as well. When they initially created or researched these tools, they were mainly for the males. But this particular tool that we have look at scoring for males and females. The process utilizes a validated instrument to reliably and accurately assess the likelihood of reoffense. It also identifies the rehabilitative efforts needed to minimize the likelihood of reoffense by court-involved children. This evidence-based practice of delinquency prevention efforts included in Georgia's juvenile justice statutory rewrite, which includes the use of an objective risk and needs assessment, which is the YLS, is an objective risk and needs assessment. So we basically assess, classify, and treat the children. So I'll tell you a little bit about risk as it relates to delinquent offenses. Risk to reoffend. Risk refers to the likelihood that a youth will recidivate reoffend, or continue to engage in delinquent behavior over a specific period of time. So recidivism, so I said the word recidivate, which people throw that around a lot, but recidivism is generally defined as future contact with the juvenile justice system. So if our goal is for them not to continue to reoffend, not for them to not have future contacts within the system. The YLS scores on a scale from low, middle, high, low, moderate, high, and very high. So if you're at high risk to recidivate, that basically means that you're more likely to reoffend. If you're at low risk to reoffend, it basically means that you're less likely. So soft touch, no touch to those individuals. However, it doesn't mean that they're at no risk of reoffending if they're at low risk. So we pay attention to that as well. There are static risk factors and dynamic risk factors. Static factors are things that cannot change. So the YLS looks at that. For example, a static risk factor is your age at first offense. That cannot be changed. But a dynamic risk factor, which is basically things that can be changed, such as your antisocial involvement with peers, problems at school, family problems, truancy, gang involvement, substance use, things of that nature that can be changed is basically what we would look at. The degree of treatment a child receives should be matched to the identified level of risk. So as we were talking about the scarcity of programs and services, we want to be able to match children that really need help with the correct programming. So intensive services should be reserved for higher risk children, as over-serving and over-supervising of low-risk kids can cause harm and increased risk of reoffending. As Mr. Graves said, you basically put the lower-risk children with the higher-risk children, and you're basically setting up a recruitment situation for them. Needs. So defining needs. Needs relative to the delinquent offense. Needs refer to the characteristics of the child that when changed are associated with changes in risk of reoffending. So basically what the child needs in order to reduce the likelihood of reoffending or committing a delinquent offense. All the studies on risk-need responsivity use the terminology criminogenic. And we would say as juvenile justice or services, providing services for juveniles, why would you say criminogenic or criminal? Because children are delinquent. They commit delinquent offenses, not criminal offenses. However, the simple fact is that that was the term, or is a term that is used when they were researching and studying these tools, but it's basically interchangeable. Criminogenic or delinquent needs are basically the needs that the YLS has to target the areas that delinquency prevention services, programs, and supervision should focus on to reduce the likelihood of reoffense. If you have the appropriate level of supervision and services, again, we have to match the services to the level of need that the child has. That would then decrease the long-term likelihood of the child participating in criminal activities in their adult years. And finally, the responsivity aspect of all of this, we have to basically factor in meeting the child basically where the child is. So if you have a child that is introverted, placing them in a group setting may not work for that child. We actually had a child a few weeks ago in court that had concerns around anger. That child was very introverted and afraid to speak out loud even in court. So if we were to place her in an environment, in a group environment, in a group setting, even though she does have issues with anger, which is a dynamic factor that can be changed, it would not work for her. So the way she would respond to that would not be helpful. So we would have to place her in a situation or in services where there would be more one-on-one in order to help her with that. And let's see, why use the classification and assessment to guide delinquency? Because it can lead to enhanced public safety. It can lead to increasing long-term positive outcomes for court-involved children. It minimizes the opportunity for biased and/or flawed decision-making. So it helps to better utilize our valuable resources of staff time and supervision capacity to reserve that for the higher risk children. Basically, again, all the services that we need to provide to them, we want to be able to use the right amount of supervision, the right amount of services for the higher risk children, if that's what they need, and the lower risk, less. It also, as Cicely also mentioned about duplication of services, being able to utilize the tool will help us with avoiding duplication of services. And let's see. So finally, the risk need responsivity framework and how it prioritizes community safety. Basically, it's R&R, the risk, who is targeted based on the level of risk to reoffend, the need, what needs to be targeted to successfully intervene, and the responsivity, how to target the behavior and thoughts to achieve behavior change. And lastly, because we talk about the tool and we're gonna assess these kids and blah, 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 and what about me? I've been doing this for 20 years and I can tell you if a kid is gonna reoffend or not just from meeting with them. Well, we do not remove professional judgment. This is to complement our professional judgment. Your professional judgment alone is good, and even if you're an expert at this and can do it, we can't duplicate your professional judgment. Like, you can't give that to someone else. But having a tool that can assess risk and need, responsivity, that can be provided. You can be trained on that, and a lot of us could use it in order to better help our children and the community. Any questions?
Excellent. So thank you all again for all the presentations that were provided. At this stage, are there any general questions? I think we're doing excellent on time. We wanted to hopefully wrap up a little earlier. Any questions that may be asked, and then we'll talk about what some of our proposed next steps will be. All right, perfect. Well, that I think is a reflection of the great work that the presenters put into their presentations today. So the next steps of this process, as Judge Grant stated, is that we, of course, want to continue to have our processes rooted in the statute and the guidelines that are provided by the statute. However, a lot of the work and the actual steps that are taking place is being developed by our partners on an ongoing basis. So, for example, even with what we're doing with the student attendance protocol committee, with a lot of our partners in that space as well, is that we're actually working with and using and leaning on the expertise of our partners in developing what these standards are, so that we don't, one, also duplicate services, but then also that we don't create unnecessary steps in the process just for the purpose of creating multiple panels and things of that nature, but that we're really considerate of the time of our partners as well as the resources of our partners, and again, that expertise that you all bring to the table that complements the work that we're doing to try to address those issues. So we are having ongoing committee meetings to actually hash out some of the specifics about what will make this the best protocol for our county, because there is no cookie cutter that can be applied, and there's no template out there that can really mirror or match the expertise that you all have and what you all are doing on a regular basis as well. So these meetings, we've been having these, this is our second, and our first was in November, so we're trying to stay on a quarterly basis. But at our next meeting that we're hoping to try to time that in the summer in preparation for children returning back to school, what we hope to be able to do is to present and provide each of your agencies with a draft of a protocol that will outline some of the specifics around those statutory guidelines that say that your agency or entity will agree and to work with and establish whatever those MOUs need to be around the protective factors like things such as information sharing and things of that nature. So that is our next meeting's goal, is to have a lot of that work done between now and 3 months from now. So we'll call all of you all back to the table, but the ask will be that if you are here as a representative or delegate from an agency, and not the executive of that agency, that you share with your executive representative from your agency, that we will be asking from the judicial perspective for your agency and entity to, again, work within the parameters of an established protocol that will outline what this panel will look like, how this will be actually facilitated, what the parameters are around it, and again, any MOUs that we may need to work out, we hope to have as much of that done as possible prior to our next quarterly meeting that will come up. All right? They got it? All right. Any questions about that process? All right. Judges, as you all know, any comments from our judges this year? Is everyone familiar with CHINs? I'm sorry, that's one thing that I heard. Everyone knows what CHINs are, right? Children in need of service. We are familiar that will be like truancy and non-delinquent behaviors like ungovernable. Sometimes folks don't realize the amount of work we do in that space. I think that's the only question I had of myself. All right, excellent. So we've got 15 minutes early. They will tell you that is a record for any juvenile part of it. Thank you all so much and continue to do